Hey everybody, how's it going? It is Sunday night. I am struggling to remember the day. It's January the 10th, 2020. Well, actually, that's a lie. Okay, so work with me here. For me, it's January the 10th, 2021. For Ian, it's January the 11th, 2021. That's going to take some time to get used to, man.
Yeah, it is. It takes a little bit of getting used to. I've been here for 3 years, and I'm still kind of adjusting to it. And right now we're at a 14-hour difference. Then we get the whole time savings thing, and suddenly 13 hours. And you've got that readjustment phase there. So every 6 months I get to readjust, and I've been doing so for 3 years, and I'm still getting used to it. So it'll take time.
I mean, I think the most, just sort of massive thing in everything you just said is it's been 3 fucking years.
Yeah.
Think about it. It's been more than 3 years since we went to see The Last Jedi together. We've known each other close to 4 years in that time. It's just, it's crazy how time goes. Like Jaden and I were just talking. Jensen, our little one, literally just turned 1, and it's like, wow. Like, I remember finding out when she was pregnant. It was like, oh, wow, that's 21 months ago. That's nuts. It's crazy.
Yeah, even as a teacher, you see that. Like, I don't have any kids of my own, but my students are my kids. And I've been teaching some of these kids for 3 years, and I see them, they'll walk by in the hall, and I'm like, wait, you're like a foot taller. What happened? I've been teaching you for 3 years, sure, but it just kind of clicked. You're tall now. What did you do?
Man, time flies, dude.
Yes,
it really goes to show you need to value every day because life's not very long at all. Matt Whitfield in the chat, and I got to poke at this. You got a Steelers game to watch? I literally just saw the score come up. It's 28-0 Cleveland in the second quarter. Good luck with that game, bud. Intel Weil, who I know you might not be familiar with Intel, Ian, but Intel is by far this channel's biggest supporter. Not to knock anybody else, because everybody has contributed to the channel quite some bit, and we appreciate it, but Intel's gone the extra mile and then some. He says, I got a Lakers regular season game, which is more important than the Steelers playoff game. It is when they're down 28-0, and it's not even half. Anyways, this is our Star Wars podcast. We don't always live stream this. It just so happened 2 weeks in a row we've been able to do it at a semi-acceptable time. It's Sunday evening where I am, Monday morning where Ian is. And here we are talking Star Wars. And, the way I would describe this show, Across the Stars, this podcast, if you will, is it's just 2 guys sitting here having a glass of blue milk at their virtual cantina.
But it works.
talking Star Wars. It's not, we're not going to sit here and we're not going to talk about whatever news just dropped from Kessel Run's transmission. Tune into the Tuesday show for that. This show, tonight we're talking about returning characters. A few weeks from now, maybe we're focused in on one specific Star Wars video game that came out 20 years ago or something. It's just we pick a topic, we go with it, and we just sort of geek out about it and focus on positivity because God knows there's enough negativity going on everywhere else.
At that point, we should also touch on, given that we're going to be talking about whatever topics, it means conjecture is also really open for us, right? It doesn't matter what the news is or what technically is considered canon or not. If something was expanded universe or something it's not even on the table yet, it's something that we can talk about and something that we might well consider, because Star Wars is awesome. It's a lot of fun. We talked about this last week. There's endless possibilities of things to talk about, and you and I, the way that Sean and I met was actually at my workplace years ago, and that's literally how we started. He starts walking through the store and he's wearing a Star Wars shirt. Hey, you like Star Wars? He's like, I do you? I'm like, of course I do. Star Wars is the greatest. And it just happened that from then on he came in the store, and it was pretty much what we're doing now.
Yeah,
just talking about Star Wars, anything Star Wars, and it's wonderful for that.
Yeah, I Man, I don't remember if I used to get a discount from you or not, but man, I could use some of those clothes now with a discount, but that's not going to happen. So, I look at the end of the day, I think it's fun. Like one of the things, I'm not referring to the channel, but one of the best things about Star Wars, and I never did get to properly emphasize this point on our last show, is theorizing. You know, the whole, your Snoke theory sucks and all that stuff that came out. And a lot of people blame Rian Johnson for that. And he certainly didn't help it, but he didn't create that. It's a common myth. It wasn't created by him. It was created by, if I'm being blunt, some idiot on another show who is not very nice to their audience. And, I've always loved theorizing. Oh, what happens next? As a kid, we only had the 3 movies. It's like, oh, let's theorize about what happens next. And then finally, I started reading and getting into the expanded universe material. And I'll give our Halloween fans, because I know there's some Halloween fans in the audience, I'll give you this nugget. Tune into Thursday's show and specifically look for some pre-produced content on this channel, because while Halloween will never be Star Wars in terms of its reach and its fan base and what it's worth, they are approaching things over at Trancas and Blumhouse and all that, much in the way Star Wars is doing things right now. And there's a lot of Halloween stuff coming down the pipeline, and it's very much formulated like Star Wars is. So there's your Halloween talk for the stream. Now back to Star Wars. Dude, returning characters. We have 6 we're going to talk about. But before we do, is there anybody that wasn't on this list that you thought, or that you feel, I still think there's a place for them in the current story going on?
There's so many. Like, that's the thing. And the basis of our list today is it's not off of news articles. It's off of just fan theories that have kind of become popular again, or new fan theories, or even just recent video game mentions or art book kind of like nods. There's so many options, and one of the characters we're going to be talking about has a history on caching. I wouldn't mind seeing, and the likelihood of it is very low, but the Young Jedi series getting into a Wookie Jedi. I loved reading those books just to get Lobaka, Chewbacca's nephew. It was just wicked. The concept of somebody taller than me, and I'm 6'8". Like, I'm not a small person. So somebody taller than me, covered in just a thick lightsaber-resistant fur for the most part, and wielding a lightsaber. Like, that's just so scary. I love it.
I know that I know this because it's on the cover. There is a Wookiee Jedi involved with the High Republic, and I have not read it yet. I have not purchased the audiobook. I'm trying to get through Heir to the Empire still. I've obviously listened to it before the audiobook of the anniversary edition, but we're trying to cover it on one of our future shows here on Tuesdays, and I'm just struggling to find time to get through it because it's like 15 hours long. And so once I get through that, I'm going to dive into the High Republic, and for the most part, I've stayed spoiler free, but a lot of people are really impressed with what it's doing. So hopefully, I can't wait to dive into that. And Wookiee Jedi, man, Wookiee fucking Jedi. Why not?
It's a perfect match. It's great. They're such harmonious creatures that they just fit into the Jedi Order really well.
All right, let's dive into our list here, man. And I think it makes sense to start with the big gun. The confirmed one, at least.
Yep.
He was first, I guess, published in 1992 in Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire. We are talking about Grand Admiral Thrawn himself. What was your first experience with that character? I'm assuming it was Heir to the Empire, but...
Actually, no, it wasn't. Oddly enough, Thrawn was kind of I was late to the Thrawn kind of world. And I'm trying to remember what game it was.
Oh, he does pop up in a game.
Yeah. And that was kind of my first encounter with him? I'm just looking into it.
I've seen the clips.
Oh, he was in TIE Fighter.
So.
Yes, yeah. So he was in TIE Fighter. So I guess that thing. What if I was late? I was a year late. That's what that means. But he's always been this very commanding character, and he's got such an awesome personality. And when I later went back and I read Heir to the Empire, I ended up going through Timothy Zahn's work, and I am a huge fan. And when the recent publications for Thrawn came out, my sister at the time was working in chapters, and working at George Richards, and I was just around the corner from that store. I just walked in. I was like, "Hey, sis, discount? Get me that book right away. Let's go." I went home and I picked it up right away. It's so worth it. He's such a great character.
I didn't have my first, I knew of the character. I heard stories for so many years, but the first time I ever experienced Thrawn was in an audiobook of the anniversary, actually, the one I'm re-listening to now from 2012 that Mark Thompson did. And I wasn't sure what to expect. And I think the reason why I went back and listened is Lucasfilm was just bought by Disney. So we're in the back half of, last quarter of 2012. And it's like, okay, well, my Star Wars hype is real. We're getting more movies. What am I going to do? And I listened to the Heir to the Empire anniversary. It was like 15 hours long. And I was just like completely blown away. It was like he has bits of Tarkin in him at that point. He even has a little bit of Vader in him, and yet he's completely unique to himself and nothing that we had seen on screen before in Star Wars. And like, for me, I was like, oh, well, I can't wait to, keep up with the adventures of Han, Luke, and Leia and see what they're going through. And instead it turned into, okay, can we get back to Thrawn now? Thrawn and Pelion? Like, let's get back to those two. And I think that's saying something when it can do that.
Yeah, you're right. There's a solid combination of characters in him, and it's interesting because that's exactly who Thrawn is. Like, it's not even an author's ploy to be like, let's see if I can make my villain more relatable by combining other villains. It's Thrawn as Chiss is, well, number one, they're extremely calculated people, right? But then to take in this extra level that he is more calculated, and he knows how to do exactly what he needs to maneuver himself in a situation where he ends up with, to borrow the cliche, the high ground, right? He knows how to do that, and it's no surprise that he ends up having people like Tarkin or Vader incorporated in his personality, because those are the personalities dominant in the Empire. Those are what he need to succeed, right? And as happens in the later series, as he gets close to the Emperor as well. Right? I mean, if you're going to get that close to the Emperor himself, if you're getting close to Sheev, like, you've got to have the personality. You've got to have that menace about you, or you'll be discarded.
I remember, and, well, I shouldn't say I remember. I only am remembering because I'm re-listening to it right now. While he's clearly a villain, he wasn't, like, it wasn't so black and white in the Heir to the Empire. And there's this one point where they have Luke caught in a tractor beam, and Luke pulls this trick and is able to escape. And this, so he calls Pelion with them, and the officer explains, "Well, I didn't know what to do." And Thrawn's just like, "Well, why didn't you know what to do?" And he's like, "Because I didn't have adequate training for this. We never went over it." So then he turns to the commander and like starts chewing out the commander, and I'm thinking, oh, fuck, he's going to give it to the commander and, like, just maybe not kill him, but chew him out. But he has Rook, his bodyguard, his Nogri bodyguard, kill the officer who made the mistake instead of the commander. And I was just like, oh, okay, no, this dude is a bad dude still, and he does have some of Vader in him. Like, it was so jarring for me at that point, because it's like I was already so into the character, I didn't think he would cross that line. And then when he crosses that line, it's like, okay, this character is basically capable of anything.
Yeah, you know what that reminds me, actually? There's, I forget which company it was. It's a famous example of this happening in the real world. Not where somebody gets killed, obviously, but the concept of why would he not kill the commander, because the onus is usually going to them, is how we see it in Star Wars. But why would you, and I forget the company, but somebody had made a mistake on some sort of an accounting system on the computer, and it cost the company millions of dollars, I think it was. And they're like, well, I guess I'm fired, right? I'm like, what do you mean you're fired? It just cost me all this money to train you to know better, And you see that situation there where, why would he kill the commander? The commander's got more training than the whatever his rank is, right?
Yeah.
Like, now the commander has to live every day of like, my ineptitude costs someone their life. I have to live with this, and surely they're going to try harder now not to make that mistake. And that's the kind of calculation you see in Thrawn. He doesn't have that boyish lashing out behavior that we see in Kylo Ren. It's not a matter of, you're in front of me right now, take my anger. He's thinking, okay, well, hold on, well, kill this guy or kill this guy. I mean, cost a lot of money to train him. Less mistakes in the future. Disposable. There we go. And it gets the job done.
No, it's chilling. Like, he's as much as I love the character, he's got some menace about him. And like you said, he basically had to, being where he came from. And the current canon version of him isn't all that much different, other than the fact Star Wars Rebels had him lose way more than he should have, in my opinion.
Unless that's his ploy.
Right. And now we know he's coming. He's going to be the big villain in their Disney Plus universe there, Thanos, if you will. And I know there's a bunch of reports out there from some scummy sites that Robert Downey Jr. might end up being Thrawn. From what I know, that is completely and utterly untrue, and that Thrawn is already cast. And my guess is it's probably Lars Mikkelsen.
That's so fitting too.
But apparently there's some truth to the fact that Robert Downey Jr. might be coming into Star Wars as his own character.
I was familiar with. It wasn't Thrawn. That surprised me that you said that. I'm familiar with Robert Downey Jr. having possible screen time in Star Wars, and I'm all for that. He's a great actor.
Me too. And you bring in the non-Star Wars audience with him the same way Baby Yoda brought in new Star Wars fans. Robert Downey Jr. would bring in new Star Wars fans. But it's not going to be Thrawn, guys. They're going to be more selective of who they choose to be Thrawn.
Not a returning character by any means, but I'd be down for Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law getting up to some hijinks in Star Wars together. I think that'd be hilarious. And they did confirm that there's more Sherlock on the way, by the the I know you were talking about that the other day.
Yep.
So that's good news for you. But that would be awesome. I mean, like, I could see them getting it. I don't think he's a correct casting for Thrawn. Mikkelsen's definitely the better choice.
I'm just stoked that it might not happen as soon as I want it to. Because I'm like, okay, fuck yeah, here we go. Give me some Thrawn. But we might have to be patient. We might not actually see him on screen for another year, 2 years.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that, though, as long as they're going to treat the character with respect and treat him properly. And by all means, it does sound like Thrawn's supposed to be the big bad in between the two trilogies. So
I would be concerned, though, that they could just use him as too much of a teaser. I have a feeling the first time we see him will probably be having to do with Ahsoka.
Yeah, that would make sense.
My biggest worry is that at the end of the season, it's just like the door opens and we get a 2-second glimpse of him, which is like awesome in its own way of being like, yeah, like he's going to be coming up next. Like, this is it. This confirms it's coming. But I don't want them to underdo him, but I also don't want them to overdo him, that he becomes outside his own personality. Remember, he's calculated. So his appearance should also be just as calculated.
I found it, other than the fact they got to sell some more toys, I found it very curious that Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian conveniently did not have a Star Destroyer. He had a cruiser.
Yeah.
And it makes me think they're saving showing a Star Destroyer again until we see what I'm assuming is a battle-damaged, modified Chimera. at this point, which would be badass. You see the Chimera goes on the bridge, and I do think Ezra has a role. I know Ezra's not on our list for returning characters because he wasn't in Legends. But I think Ezra has a role to play here with the Thrawn stuff. They've been gone for so long that I almost feel like they're frenemies at this point.
Which isn't outside of Thrawn's behavior as well. He's the exact kind of character who'd be like, okay, well, enemy of my enemy is my friend. He'd utilize that. But on top of that, if he had the chance to sit down across the table without threat of anyone's life with Yoda, he'd be there for that. Yep. You know, like he would definitely be the kind of character that would sit down and have this kind of straightforward conversation, and at the end of the day, stand up from the table, walk away, and they'd walk their way. If that could be arranged, he's the character to do that. More so than I think any other character. And when it comes down to villains of the Empire, he's the only really level-headed one that wouldn't get caught up in their own tirade, I find, and end up in some sort of a combative state by the end of that.
He definitely has honor. There's no mistake about that. I just want to mention Intel Wild in with a super chat. He's not even a Star Wars fan, and there he is supporting the channel. $25 for the Empire. And then DMT adds in, Yoda X Darth Vader is all I want from my Star Wars fan fiction. LOL. But for real, though, I've never watched much Star Wars. I'm just here for the hosts. Oh, thanks, man. That's appreciated. All right, let's move on. Who do you want to touch on next? We go from Thrawn. Where do you want to go now?
I mean, we're already on this idea of admirals. I think I would be amiss to not go to my favorite heroine. Well, not even a heroine. To me, like I'm a huge Empire fan, so for me, I'm like, oh, she's a hero. Like I love this girl. Natasi Dala is, I think, somebody that I'd love. I said this last week, and today is kind of just a double down effort for me. She's such an amazing character, and she has the Tarkin behavior, which we were talking about with Thrawn. I think I don't even want her to be the big bad, but if we are dealing with Warlords era lore and we've got that on screen, I would love to see Natasi Dala, even if her downfall is Thrawn, because I could see that being very well arranged. She's Tarkin-esque, he's Tarkin-esque. They both have the ability to expend the other in terms of their battle strategy without really caring, as long as strategically it's for the upper hand of themselves. But what she misses out on is that unlike Thrawn's very calculated behavior, she is more aggressive about everything. She gets to the top because she kills first and then she asks questions after. You know, and that's the kind of person she's always been in the books. And if they're bringing in book characters, and that's I think the big basis out of this conversation with us today is these are characters from EU, characters from the books, and as we've seen with Mandalorian, it's almost like a nice little new hope for you and I, that if all these little nods are happening in the TV shows, especially from the books, that maybe someone in direction is also a big fan of these characters and can bring them back. So Natasi Dala for me is definitely up there with Thrawn. Like I'd scream, I'd cry, I would freak out, to put it short.
Not to mention, not to get political or anything of that sort, but like there's obviously a push for strong female characters. It doesn't have to just be strong female heroes. It can be strong female villains too. And I mean, again, I hated Dala, not because I didn't like the character, but because she was such a good villain. It's like, oh.
Yeah. And in terms of strong female villains, like it's so weird, some of the direction choices in the movies, the recent movies, because Gwendolyn Christie, Captain Phasma, I thought that was such a snub. Like the way she dies, the way she's used, such an awesome kind of concept of a character, such an amazing, strong female actress, an actor just to, like, so talented, and just got snubbed hard. And it was so disappointing to see it.
The other thing that kills me about that is, like, I'm a Game of Thrones fan, man. I'm getting ready to rewatch the series for the first time since it ended. And like Gwendolyn Christie's so fucking good. Like they just utterly misused her. And I don't want this to turn into sequel hate or anything like that. But like,
No.
you have.
No, I think this is a calculated opinion. Like watching how it pro the heroine they were, and then being like, yes, like strong female leads, and then they're like Gwendolyn Christie, strong female character, just snubbed. I don't think that's the sequel hate. I think that's just a pretty fair critical analysis.
I also want to point out the last time we saw Natassi Dalla, she was working with. She was working with none other than Mandalorians. Just throwing that out there. Fate of the Jedi. She uses Mandalorians and what's the other? Mercenaries. Mandalorians and mercenaries to take over the Jedi Temple, and it's just wow. There's already a tie there. They can go back because it's very clear all the Mandalorians are not on the same page. So,
very spread out.
I don't think
they've got a clan out there.
I don't think it's a stretch to say, hey, she could still have involvement in what's going on, and I think it would be fantastic.
Actually, it's funny. Fennec Shan, when she first showed up because of her hairstyle, I was like, hey, that hairstyle looks strikingly familiar. It's the exact same hairstyle that Natassi Dalla is frequently portrayed with the braid right down the side there and like towards the front. And I was like, ooh, hey, maybe. And then it wasn't.
I want to move to a character that's not on the list, but for all intents and purposes, at least in EU and in Legends, really helped Luke Skywalker build his Jedi Order. He was a focal point in video games and then later on a supporting character in novels. Kyle Katarn. And I really do think Kyle Katarn has a spot to be earned somewhere here in this new canon. And before all the EU and Legends haters come out and say, oh, they don't give a shit about Kyle Katarn, go ahead and look at Kanan's literal outfit in Rebels and take one guess where it's inspired from. Kyle Katarn, literally the shoulder piece and everything. I'd really like to think that Luke's Academy wasn't just filled with a bunch of kids and he had a couple of helpers at that point. And I would love to see Kyle Katarn be one of them. Do you think he has a shot at being in the new canon or someone to be left behind?
I would I mentioned this to you last night. Kyle Katarn, he's such an amazing, again, just such great characters. I love the EU characters because to me they're so diverse. He is as if somebody had taken they were trying to build up some sort of a D&D scenario, and I want my character to be a smuggler like Han Solo because I love Han Solo, but also a Jedi, and that's who you end up with. And it's funny actually. Cassian from Rogue One, his outfit was also strikingly familiar. Just he had the jacket, and so I remember when the trailers were first coming out, people were kind of suspecting, hey, could we really get Kyle Katarn in some kind of shape or form? And I agree. I think one of the biggest blanks right now is Luke's temple. We don't have much in terms of instruction there. We don't have much in terms of holocron knowledge. We do see holocrons come up in that approximate timeline with the it'd be before the timeline. I was thinking of Jedi Fallen Order. We do see holocrons showing up there. So holocrons are still very much around, but the instructors, not even instruction, seem to be missing. And I think you might even have another character on your list, because I don't know why I didn't mention her, but another possible instructor. But Kyle Katarn, definitely, I think he's got room to come on, just because he is roguish, which Star Wars seems to be a fan of these days.
Very much so. Yeah. The other character I had that was not scheduled is also tied to Thrawn, also has played for both teams. Debuted in Heir to the Empire, Was also in the Dark Forces Mystery of the Sith video game. Was a special unlockable character in Masters of Tears Kasi. And was once Luke Skywalker's wife, Mara Jade. They have sort of stayed clear from her. And I honestly believe, and again, I don't even like using the term fixed because it's just going to offend a bunch of people. But for me, where we see Luke at the end of Mandalorian Season 2 and where he is in the sequel trilogy are obviously two different ends of the spectrum. And obviously the Jedi Temple falling sends him there. But I can't help but wonder, and I mean, the Jedi Temple falls basically the night he goes to kill his nephew, which is just... I'm sorry, you can be the biggest sequel supporter that you want. I will never understand that one at all. But without context, or without
what you're getting to, yeah.
So what if
keep going? Yeah.
What if Mara Jade died? You know, there's still so much time for him to meet Mara Jade and have her die, kind of like what happened in Legends, and have that added to it. So it's not just you're losing your temple, you're losing your temple, you're losing Mara. And then, okay, yeah, no, I see why Luke's a fucking prick in The Last Jedi, because he really is. And Mark Hamill played it very well. He didn't agree with any of it, but he played it very well. And, so I really do think there's a lot of room for Mara Jade. And again, who wouldn't want to see a Force-using, lightsaber-wielding Darkseid user who would have a redemption arc? A powerful female character. Who wouldn't want to see that? I'd sign up for that.
Oh, definitely. That I'm glad that you brought her up, because she's so tied into Kyle Katarn as well in terms of the instructor role at the Jedi Academy. The idea of somebody who can come in and say, okay, well, this is the Force, this is how it's used. And on her case, you've got extreme Darkseid leaning powers and extreme Darkseid history. And she can be, okay, well, this is how you get away from that kind of darkness. This is how you do get your balance. Kyle Katarn, on the other hand, is roguish, was very novice, kind of makes his way through his trials in his own very MacGyvered ways. So in that sense, you've got the people who would have to train themselves in the Force or connect themselves to the Force on distant planets where Luke is too far from. And when they get to the temple, well, hey, guess what? We've got an instructor that specializes in trying to train yourself. And he's right here, and there's a whole series there, the life of the Academy. But then they're getting so close to the Young Jedi series. And again, I would love to see that. Even if it's a kiddish kind of show, I'd still pick it up. And that's just because the temple was such an iconic point, especially in those late 90s, early 2000s games. As soon as you get to the Jedi Knight games, right? Late 90s? I think that was the first one, late 90s, right?
Yeah, and then, because Academy came out in 2003.
Yeah. So that would be amazing. I think that Mara Jade fits in well with, and I hadn't considered it before you mentioned it to me the other day. She fits in so well with a potential downfall of Luke. And I say that even though my favorite partner of his was actually Callista.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before. I thought Callista was amazing. And I could accept them ignoring Callista altogether and giving Mara Jade an incredible downfall kind of moment. Even if it's not her canon death, but the way that Callista goes down, she brings down the Eye of Palpatine. Like, that's amazing. And I think that kind of major destruction, martyrdom, kind of pseudo-martyrdom, would be a cool way for her to die, but also for Luke to kind of be like, what's the point?
Yeah, no, I feel you. So there you have it. So far, we've run through Thrawn, Dala, Mara Jade, and Kyle Katarn, and we got two more on our list here in this show. I want to go to Revan first, just because I think the other one we have on the list, it seems like there's a lot of smoke that may in fact happen, and where there's smoke, there's usually fire. So let's go to Revan, who has been made canon, And behind my head, you can see a Funko Pop there. And I know there's the Black Series lightsaber. And he continues to have merch come out nonstop. I think it's a no-brainer. Revan is coming at some point. I just don't know in what medium and in what era, because they can change so much now, right? Like, it doesn't have to be what we think.
Well, he spans eras now. That's the other important point, right? So he's not just KOTOR anymore. He's not just that base video game acknowledgement, right? And that's the huge thing for Revan fans. And we've got books, we've got appearances in video games. His appearance in the Old Republic is also very cool for his potential to come back, just because it again shows this idea of like, I can cross time. Technically, I'm working on a solution to be able to go across time. And the reason why I brought it up that I'd like to talk about him is actually because of his recent appearance in video games again.
Yep.
And video games aren't really making things very canon these days. But the fact that Disney is like, hey, we can get merch off of this, suggests that they're kind of poking and like, hey, well, who's interested? And outside of the Black Series events and characters, what has recently happened, and I don't know if everyone's aware of it, and I briefly touched on it last week, was that there has been, in Star Wars The Old Republic, the online RPG, they have cosmetic systems in it, and they have recently released a Jedi Knight Revan armor set. 10 years after his original armor set was released. But, and I don't play very many mobile games. I just found out last night that Galaxy of Heroes, the Star Wars mobile
He's
game,
in that.
also has Jedi Knight Revan. So that is really, really enticing for me. And the hope that we could have Revan moving forward, and tied into Revan, my biggest hope, and I'd like to know what your hope, what they could do with him. I'd like to see Mandalorian Wars. I'd like to get into that.
I have two hopes basically. Well, I guess three. One would be Mandalorian Wars TV series that leads into the events of maybe a retelling of Knights of the Old Republic. So we're following Revan and Malak and Mitra Surik during the Mandalorian Wars. And then it leads into those events. And I just think you could do that so amazing on a Disney Plus series, 10 episodes a season, focus just on the Mandalorian Wars for the first couple of years, go through it, develop these characters, and then branch them off into the galaxy back then. So that'd be my first hope. My second hope would be some sort of Knights of the Old Republic trilogy, and it's been like that for a while. And my third hope is, and there's definitely been some rumblings recently, is if you're not going to give them to us in a TV format or a movie format, let's do another friggin' game in current canon that's an RPG, not something that's just linear. And let's get Revan back in that way. So they'd be my three hopes. And I do believe one of the three is definitely going to happen.
Yeah, if they ended up doing the Mandalorian Wars, it also just occurred to me, my favorite KOTOR companion, Bowder, totally fits into that. You know, getting into the general role and having Bowder, and that would be amazing. The potential to bring back even more characters, given the topic that we're talking about, that's just an incredible opportunity. Would they go so far as to include KOTOR characters? I don't know, because that's kind of treading on. I think they're trying to avoid territory where they're restricting themselves, which is the whole reason why they retconned EU, which is why they just scrapped it all. They're afraid of getting themselves stuck in a place where they could have that theoretical red shirt guy from World of Warcraft. Do you know the reference?
No idea.
They had written lore through World of Warcraft through all the years, and this guy in a red shirt comes up during one of their conventions during a Q&A panel, and it's like, hey guys, you said this in the lore, but what about that in the lore that you just contradicted? And he became a huge sensation. And I think they're afraid of getting into a point where they publish something and the fans are like, whoa, wait, but you said that, you know? And I think it's a smart decision. And I think Baby Yoda was a good kind of way to build traction without writing themselves into a corner. And I think the Mandalorian Wars, if they do include KOTOR, is going to write themselves into a corner.
Yeah, it's very possible. I do think they can pick and choose what they do with characters and go from there. Like I know there's a lot of people that can't stand Bowder, and I loved him. He was one of my favorite characters in Knights of the Old Republic too.
Yeah.
Hell, you know what? I loved Knights of the Old Republic too. I hated that. I hated it that LucasArts rushed them. I think Obsidian gets a bad rap for that, and really the responsibility was on LucasArts, who just kept jerking their chain basically. So other than the fact that the game wasn't properly finished and it's clearly rushed at the end, it's like the only Star Wars material that at times feels like you're in a horror movie. Like literally, you start out, what is it, the Paragus mining facility where you start out as? Yep. Actually, I'm sorry, you start out in the Ebon Hawk is basically in flames in an asteroid field, basically. And then you get to the Paragus mining facility. And it's like, oh my God, that's dark. That's intense. Why don't we get material like that now? And I love those games. Kieran's in the chat. Hey, Kieran. We were supposed to play through Knights of the Old Republic 1, a bunch of us together, and I don't have time. It's like, eventually I will, but to be honest, like if someone's like, okay, if you had to play through either one of these games right now, I'd probably want to play through Knights of the Old Republic 2 just because it's been so long for me, and I love the game, and other than the ending, it is really cool. I do think that they found a really unique way, though, to turn that ending into a really high-quality Revan novel, which is basically Knights of the Old Republic 3, and then later on into the Old Republic. Big shout-out to Intel Wild. Great show, guys. Lakers won. Lakers won. Big shock. Very generous super chat, my friend. Thank you very much. Kieran says, I know we got one more character to get to here. Kieran's one of our co-hosts on Tuesdays. He says, read the start of the Light of the Jedi. It's intense. So I think I know what he's talking about. Maybe he's talking about more than that. IGN did the first chapter of it. I don't know if you read it several months ago when they released the first chapter.
I did not.
So
no, I'm High Republic spoiler free.
So I won't tell you what happens, but like I'm reading the first chapter of the High Republic. This is like in August or September or something. And like, so there's no audio book. I mean, I'm going to get the audio book, but at that time I'm just reading, and there's a bunch of characters. I don't know who any of them are. And it like starts off in a very compelling way. And, you know, you get through this chapter, you get to know these people, and then all of a sudden, like this massive event happens. And it's just kind of like, and I hope this doesn't give too much away, but it's like, actually, I won't even say that. I'm like, oh, whoa, that's very much like this one TV show that's out there, non-Star Wars TV show. I'm like, they just went there. Holy fuck. That's, you know, you look at the cover, you look at the cover, and it's like, oh, it's Light of the Jedi, and, you know, you're not expecting anything dark and intense, and the end of the first chapter, man, made me go, oh my God, I need to read this thing today, because that's badass for them to go there like that dark, that intensity. I'm sure Kieran's talking. Yeah, Kieran says the second chapter is just as nuts. No spoilers, but it's definitely setting up a big event. I can't wait to dive into this, man. Like by the end of the first chapter, I'm sure if you just Google IGN, you can read the first chapter. You'll be blown away with what they end up doing at the end of that first chapter. It's just like, wow. Not only was I not expecting that from this is Star Wars material, and they just went there. It was really cool stuff. We got one more character to get to here, man, on possible returning characters in the Star Wars Legends before we wrap up for the night. And I feel like this one was, a good one to save for last. It's not necessarily the one I want to see the most, but there's been a lot of smoke there in terms of like rumors and reports, and this person returning to play the character post Revenge of the Sith, and that is we may in fact see the return of Mace Windu. Why do you think, or maybe don't think, this should happen, depending on what side of the fence you fall on?
It's funny. I'm actually kind of in between on it, and I know I brought it up, and I was like, yeah, we should talk about this. It's not even a matter of like, oh, I'm so excited, we need more Mace Windu. It's not impossible at this point. They have brought back so many characters from on-screen death in Star Wars that until you really see them as like a Force ghost, we can't confirm they're actually dead. And it's such a weird place to be but also a great way to be, because again, this goes back to Star Wars is built off of fan theory, like that whole ability for us to be like, hey, like, what about this, what about that? Mace Windu coming back, we see him fall out the window, and that's as far as we get. And I love the art that we were looking at the other night with the guy Mace Windu with one, like Nick Fury style, having lost sight through one eye. And if he came back, what I would like is for him to actually be done with the Jedi Order. Not in Luke's style. Not in Luke's style of him cutting... Well, okay, either he cuts himself off from the Force because of the pain of Order 66 and the betrayal, but he's always been a very, very combative Jedi. Which is so funny because he's meant to juxtapose Yoda. He's meant to be the action where Yoda is the inaction. And you see that when they're sitting next to each other and they're meditating. But he's also very complacent in those times. Even though he's the most likely Jedi, in my opinion, who should have gone out and been ready to fight. Instead, we had Obi-Wan and Anakin being the plot drivers, which makes sense given that they're the protagonists. But Mace Windu's personality, his stance on Jedi politics and his use of the Force, use of the lightsaber, he seems to be the most fitting. And I feel like his downfall would be a point of disgrace, actually, with himself. We were so blind, we were so inactive, that we lost control of the galaxy. We let the Sith build up in our own home, in our own backyard. And if he came back, I would like to see him having fallen to the dark side. Because to me, I think that'd be very fitting.
Okay, so if he were to come back, I'm with you on that one. Shocker, we're agreeing on this. I think he should be Darkseid. I always thought that, look, I never expected them to be like, okay, the Obi-Wan TV series is actually going to be, I thought Anakin was going to get brought up in flashbacks just because we used to cover that stuff way back on Star Wars Wastelands in 2015. But I never expected them to be like, oh yeah, by the way, Anakin and Obi-Wan are going to fight again, and this is going to be the rematch of the century. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I'm for it, but I wasn't expecting that. I would have had it where Windu tracks down Obi-Wan, finds out he's, hiding Anakin's kid, and it's his goal to basically execute Luke and have Obi-Wan and Windu go at it, and have Obi-Wan have to strike down Windu in order to save Luke. That's the way I would have written it, because I think Sam Jackson's capable of playing a badass villain, especially with all that baggage, you could say, from everything that happened. I also like the idea of him like almost being cyborgish after what happened. So yeah, I would love that, and I would love it to be Windu versus Kenobi, because I know a lot of people are so on the Windu was the strongest Jedi back then, but I always thought that by the time Revenge of the Sith came around, you basically had Yoda and then some form of Anakin and Obi-Wan and then Windu as like sort of the high points of the Jedi Order.
Yeah, it's Mace Windu. The one thing that I'd like to see him come back with is the fact that he's the most Force-wielding Jedi that we've seen. He, to me, is the parallel of Palpatine and Force powers. Palpatine's the kind of guy that'll just like, I'm on Exegol here, Force Storm, boom, and I'm going to light up the whole skies. Mace Windu, we've seen lose his lightsaber. Now, this is the OG Clone Wars cartoon. And I still adore that scene, that big fight when he's got the super carrier that he's fighting, and loses his lightsaber, and is like, oh, that's okay. I can use the Force to punch through droids. Like, that's so cool, man. He used it in such innovative ways in the show that I would love to see that when it comes down to it, if there was like an Obi-Wan and Mace Windu duel, that it's Obi-Wan's combat is definitely the superior combat style. He's definitely got the better lightsaber training and better lightsaber skills, and that's no secret. And the Jedi Masters on Coruscant had even admitted that in lore. But I think that Mace Windu, in terms of combat force, actually outranks Yoda. I think he's kind of the reason why he's always with Yoda is that when it comes down to it, Yoda's got the nimble lightsaber skills as well as Force mastery, but Mace Windu's got that Force combat mastery. But again, I've always seen him as very combative as an individual.
Kieran in the chat says, I see Mace coming back as a Jedi version of Maul, always trying to fight back, but always failing. So here's my thing.
I don't know if I'd want it always failing. I think I'd want it like a one failure and out. I'd be okay with him coming back, but I don't want him back for seasons. I want him coming back as this big bad or big good, but he's got to finish it off. I don't want him back forever. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion.
Like, if I had to choose one way or another, I'd choose not to bring him back. And the reason for that is he has that fight with Palpatine, and being they shot it in literally only one day on set and used a lot of creative camera tricks in order to make it like some people don't like that fight. I actually love it in the way it looks, especially when it gets down to just Mace versus Palpatine and the close-ups and how it's shot. And it's not so much about the moves that they're doing, although I thought the moves were creative that they were doing. It's more about the two people in the fight and their presence, one with the Jedi, one with the Sith, even though I thought Mace Windu was the biggest dick Jedi of them all. I don't want him to come back because he was going to strike down Palpatine, or at least he thought he was. I don't even know if he could have at that point if Palpatine's just toying with him. I think that's the gist of it. Palpatine wanted Anakin to step in, and Anakin does step in, and he gets his hand cut off, and then gets massive Force lightning, like point blank from Palpatine, and thrown out a window. And I know people will be like, well, I mean, Luke survived Force lightning. It's like, yes, but Luke hadn't just had his hand cut off, Force lightning point blank, and then thrown, 500 stories to his, death. Because I would imagine as he's falling there, he's probably brain damaged, can't really control anything, and probably gets smoked by multiple vehicles in there. Like,
now, that's not to say that the first vehicle to hit him, he ends up landing on, right? Like, we've seen Anakin fall down, a controlled fall, granted, but we've seen him jump out in Coruscant before. So we've seen the falls of Coruscant survived. We've seen it in the animation as well. I'm not against the survival there. It's plausible.
I'm just
worried. Go ahead.
I'm just worried that if they bring him back, kind of like you were saying earlier, then, you're opening the door for basically, well, this person's not dead, and that person's not dead, and this person's not dead. And I don't want to take it away from it because I think that there's a really unique story told between Anakin and Windu throughout that prequel trilogy that ends with Anakin costing him his life.
But to touch on what you said about him hunting down Luke, it's this. I like that there's always been a pessimism of Mace Windu towards Anakin. There's always been this kind of watching him from the side, like, I don't trust you, And I think it would be fitting that he blames Anakin and Anakin's legacy for the downfall of the Jedi. And that kind of hatred or distrust, and we already know that it's fear, really. And fear leads to hate and suffering. And that's the path to the dark side. It's so fitting, and how great it would be if Palpatine was the one who orchestrated that, because he's already so involved in turning people, And if he came back, I stand by that. I'd want it to be a one and done. I couldn't have him coming back for a lot. But I'm already at a point with how many characters have been brought up and how Maul was brought back twice. Like, at that point, I'm like, anybody's open game. That's what it comes down to for me.
Basically, yeah. And, I mean, we all know Lucas wanted to do something with Maul in his sequel trilogy, too. So it's just like, oh, man, when's enough? I mean, I like Maul, too, and I loved Sam Witwer's portrayal of Maul in the Clone Wars and in Rebels, but eventually enough's enough. Dude, just like that, in the blink of an eye, another hour has come and gone, and we're at the end of this fun little show of two guys just sitting in a canteen, a virtual canteen, or in this case, a virtual Star Destroyer bridge, sitting in their seats, just talking one Star Wars topic today, really, and that's returning characters. And an hour later, in a fairly active chat, and it's a lot of fun. I'm going to end it with this, though, man. Mark Smith earlier in the chat asked, between 1 and 10, how big of a Star Wars fan are you?
20. I'm not even ashamed to admit it. I said it last week when I introduced myself to my class to go, hello, everybody. My name is Ian Teacher. I'm 208 centimeters tall, and my favorite thing in the whole wide world is Star Wars. And all the kids go, not even your mom and dad? I'm like, no, Star Wars here, mom and dad here. And it's funny because I get to show them, if any of them know anything about Star Wars, and I think I even showed you this. My dad, when I grew up watching Star Wars, my dad was the spitting image of Sir Alec Guinness. And it was so crazy that when old Obi dies, I used to jump up from the chair and scream upstairs, Dad, you died! And just to kind of keep him up to date on where he was in Star Wars. And I'm so glad he showed it to me because it was such a weird thing to see Alec Guinness on the screen and then look at my dad and be like, what is happening here? So I grew up on Star Wars. I'm a full 20. I'd easily say that. How about you?
I know people that'll disagree with it, but I'm more than a 10 out of 10. There's a bunch of people out there that think if you don't love everything Star Wars, it means that you're not an obsessive Star Wars fans. And I look at it as, hey, I get upset about things because of how much I love it. If I didn't love it this much, then I wouldn't give a shit. As much as this channel covers Halloween and horror, the computer's on an angle right now where you got the special edition A New Hope and Empire posters there, Thrawn Ascendancy's behind my shoulder, Attack of the Clones, which, by the way, is a Star Wars movie I like. That's right, I like Attack of the Clones. Don't hate at me. I love Star Wars, and I'll always love Star Wars, but that doesn't mean I'm going to love every decision that's made. But it doesn't, you don't have to agree with everybody.
And I think that's the important part about it is the more you love something, the more critical you're going to be of it. And not being afraid to be critical of it is an important step. And to reiterate what we started with last week, and I think it's a great note to end on as well, is Star Wars is whatever you make it to be. I love everything Star Wars, even the stuff, and dare I say, I love the stuff I hate. There's stuff in Star Wars I'm like, that's garbage. I don't like that. But I love it.
It's funny you say that.
Because it's Star Wars.
I literally was saying, I think it was a couple of days ago to a buddy of mine, I'm like, he basically asked me why I don't like The Last Jedi. And I'm like, and I'll end it with this. Because there are parts of The Last Jedi that I absolutely fucking love, that I think are absolutely magnificent, and not just the marketing either. There are parts in that movie that's like, oh my God, I'm alive. This is great. And then there are parts in that movie where it's just like, I will never understand how people think that this is a fully complete movie and not just a complete dumpster fire at times. But to those people, and my son's included in that, I envy them. I wish I could look at it like they do, and I just can't. And, it's because of love. If I didn't care about Star Wars, I'd be like, oh, whatever, there's another Star Wars, there's another space movie. Whippity-doo-dah-day. Let's move on. We just talked about Star Wars returning characters for an hour and 2 minutes. We love Star Wars.
It's funny because even then, it's like I got Quinlan Voss on the top of my head, and then there was another character we were just talking about that I was like, wait a second, that's great for them. There's endless possibilities, and I don't care if they take them or not. It's just so fun to have it on the table. It's like having action figures when you're a kid and just like playing with them. And that's exactly what I see us doing right now. We've got action figures, endless amounts of them, and we're like, let's put them on the table. Look at them. How do they work out together? And it's such a fun thing to do. Star Wars is, thankfully, it seems like it's endless. And it's always been. After the original trilogy, I remember after reading the books, I was like, I hope Star Wars never ends. And then when they retconned everything, I was like, oh, Star Wars might be ending. And then we get Mando back, and I'm like, I am back in, fully strapped. Let's go. I am ready for whatever's next. I love Star Wars. It's been great.
Back in the saddle again. Kieran in the chat says, I like this Ian guy. Get him on our show. Well, funny you mentioned that because on Tuesday, a revamped, new-looking Fandom Empire, the Star Wars show, will have its first episode titled The Beginning, where we'll be focusing in on some of the news that dropped tonight, which I have not read any of it yet. I know Ahsoka stuff dropped tonight. And we're also going to provide an in-depth look at the Phantom Menace, the marketing leading up to the movie, how crazy the hype train was around it, and how much Star Wars was blown up before the movie came out, and then the movie came out. So we're going to look at that, and then we have I guess you could call it the return of Star Wars Wastelands in a way. We've taken the most memorable segment from that show back in the day, the Star Wars Wastelands Trivia Showdown, and have brought it back and fused it with our Death Watch trivia. So starting tomorrow, the Wastelands Trivia is back as part of the Phantom Empire Star Wars show, and we're going to be keeping track, Ian, you'll remember this, keeping track of everyone's win-loss record in trivia and having other guests on from other shows. So hopefully we can sneak you in on a Tuesday night and get you to compete.
Wednesday morning.
Yeah, Wednesday morning for you. Sorry. We'll try to sneak you on at some point in time and compete in trivia. But tomorrow night, we have a fatal four-way match to kick things off for the Star Wars Wastelands Trivia Championship. Nice. Kieran will be taking on Tommy, Johnny, and his returning brother to the show, Thaden, who will join us for trivia. And one of those four are going to be the trivia champion. So you can tune into that Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Fandom Empire YouTube channel. Check us out on social media at FandomEmpireNow on Twitter and Instagram, or at ATSSWPOD, ATSSWPOD, Across the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. We're on Twitter. Check it out. Ian, until next time, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always great.
May the Force serve you well.